Another Saw movie, another game, but is this one worth playing? It's time to find out. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm Chris, thanks for stopping by and watching my review for Saw X. So before we get into my review of the new film, I want to kind of give a brief history of my love-hate relationship with the Saw franchise. I'm not a massive Saw franchise lover, so before you click off, just wait a second, calm down. I don't hate the movies, I just think some of them are bad, and you and I both know that they're bad. I really like the first three. I think the third one is obviously weaker than the first two, but I really like those films. I think it goes off the rails a lot. I liked kind of what they were doing with Spiral, and interesting enough, I was reading up about this film and found that this was kind of what they wanted to do before they ran into Chris Rock, and he kind of pitched that, and we got Spiral. Obviously, I don't think we're gonna get any more films in that Spiral kind of timeline, but overall, I think that movie was doing some interesting things, while I didn't like the copycat nature of the film. So let's get into Saw X. Overall, I really did enjoy the film, and I want to talk about that. I do have one or two nitpicks that I'll leave for the end, so we're going to be mainly positive here. But this movie is squeezed in between the first two films, which I do like, and sometimes this can be a negative. Sometimes they can just not have enough story to tell in a prequel, hence why I'm super worried for Pet Sematary Bloodlines, because I just don't think that's very interesting, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's just useless information that you don't need. You're just like, did we really need to go down this path? Because I already know the end result, so telling me this stuff doesn't give me any more context for the latter films, but I think this film does, as the first half of this film is very much a character study. So Saw X revolves around John Kramer, yet again played by the fantastic Tobin Bell, who is amazing in this movie, by the way. He is the best part, and he's seeking this experimental cancer treatment when all goes awry and he finds out that this is actually a con. He is back to his old ways, brutally setting traps and letting people play for their lives. Okay, so what I really like about this film is that the first half of it is very much a character study of John Kramer. This is the most John Kramer that we've really ever seen in all of the movies, probably combined, because the first half of the movie is all him. Even the latter half of the film is all him. You do have a little bit of Amanda sprinkled in, which she was in this more than I thought she would be. And it does actually add context to her character for the other two films, which I kind of thought, you know, she's here in one movie and then she's kind of like radically over here, I feel like. So this kind of fills in that gap where she does have some conflict with what John Kramer is doing in these films, and you see her kind of bridge that gap that you don't see in the other films, where she's like, oh, I don't know if I want to be a part of this. And he's like, well, you'll see, because if you can't handle this, you're not going to be able to finish out all the rest of the work that I have planned. So I thought that was interesting. Obviously, the second half of the film is trap. That's what it is. Classic Saw. Some of you will love that. Some of you will be like, oh, I like this new direction we were going in, and now we're just going back to Saw. So I'll leave that up to you to decide what type of Saw fan you are. Do you like this kind of more character-driven thing, or do you like the nonsensical shit that we got with the later Saw movies, which I was like, I don't even know what's going on in half those movies. He's got more apprentices than anybody combined. That dude is at this point a mass murderer. He's just not doing it even after his death. I don't know why these people are still continuing to do this, but that's for another topic anyway. So that's what I really liked about this movie. The acting across the board I think is pretty well done, and for the first time Jigsaw does kind of get somebody who is an antagonist to him and being like, no, you think you're good, but I got you. And a lot of that I think is the weakened state of Jigsaw in this movie, where obviously he is dealing with this cancer in its fullest effect. And so I think that's what was really well done. Obviously Tobin Bell was old then and he's old now, so they just make him look more sickly and more decrepit than he did in those films. So it does work in kind of bridging the two films, where you're like, okay, I can, you know, feel that he does fit into his character between those films. Obviously, Amanda's wig is terrible. We won't, we won't belabor that point, because I think we all know that is bad. She does obviously look a little older, so that's really the only thing that kind of pulls out. And one of the nitpicks we'll get out of right of the way is that Amanda's wig's back, and obviously you can tell that she's a little older, and so you can tell this film is not in that zone if you look carefully. Now, if you're watching the back to back to back to back, you may not notice it, or you may notice it a lot. I don't know. I haven't watched these films back to back yet, but overall, I did like all that. It does retain the color grading and the fast-paced cuts that the original Saw movies did do, while the later ones obviously just got, you know, I don't know, they got very torture porny, and I really just didn't like that. That's why I don't like those movies. I feel like obviously the stories got very convoluted, and I don't think the traps were very good. The traps here are a mixed bag. I think some of them are very good, and I think some of them are pretty lame. But overall, again, I like the story-centric nature that this film takes over just being very graphic. But it is graphic. You don't lose that. It is very much a Saw movie through and through, so you won't be disappointed if you're just there for those kills, because the back half of the movie is that. Okay, another nitpick I have, I don't really have any negatives, surprisingly. I think for the most part, what this film set out to do, it does 100%. They set out to tell this story in between the first and second Saw, and to give more backstory and more character development for Amanda and John Kramer, and they do that successfully 100%. I like everything they do, and it does kind of set up what they do in the future and connects it back to those films. The one thing I don't like, and obviously this is a nitpick for me personally, and it's not a bad thing, it just kind of came out of nowhere. It's not really spoiler, obviously, and we're going to talk about Billy. So Billy is a very prevalent, you know, persona of Jigsaw, and he does fit in those movies because they're kind of campy, whereas this film is far more serious in tone than I think a lot of the other films are. And so when Billy rolls out with the little tape recorder, I know that it's just fan service, and we really didn't need him in this film at all, so I don't fault them for doing it because I knew he was going to be in it. I think it was just kind of like, oh, this is very serious. While it does have some undercurrent of like meta humor, which I do like, they're kind of poking holes and poking fun at some of the elements that we're like, we know that's bullshit, and they're like, hey, we also know that that doesn't make any sense and is kind of nonsensical about this franchise. But Billy kind of took me out because I was like, okay, very serious, you know, we're dealing with this cancer. These people are obviously worse people than John Kramer, so you get this kind of like shit against shit people, and so it kind of threw me out. But again, some of you will love to see Billy back, and I wasn't opposed to seeing him. It just kind of threw me out because I was like, oh, he's just rolling up, and he kind of came out of nowhere, and I felt like it was just kind of thrown in there, but I understand why they had to do it. Again, lastly, I really do like the film. Again, the Saw music comes back in at the end, you know, when they're doing all the reveals. Very classic Saw. So if you really like those first three films, I think you're going to really like this film. If you like the latter films more than the other ones, I don't know how you're going to feel about it because this is more reminiscent of those first three films with just a little more story in there, which for me personally kind of pulls me through these films. I just don't really care that much about the traps. I think they're all cool and interesting, but that type of horror just doesn't really click with me. That's why I'm not a huge fan of this franchise. I think most of them are fine again, but I like the first three a lot, and I think this fits into that very nicely. So that's pretty much all I've got. I recommend this film if you like the first three Saw movies. If you like Saw, I think you're really going to enjoy this film. You may not like the first half, which is more story driven, but you also may come to be like, oh, that's a new and interesting take on the franchise, and I hope they do more, kind of filling in the gaps. I don't know what they're going to do. Obviously, I don't think we're going to get any more Spiral stuff, but I guess that remains to be seen. If you like what we do here, consider becoming part of the collective, and you can check out all my other reviews. We do a lot of 4K stuff, a lot of older reviews, so check all that out. I'm going to link some videos for you at the end as always, and I'll talk to you guys in my next review.